Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to have a look at the first devlog of the new War Thunder update season. Now remember, this update usually comes out in September, so it's not too surprising to see devlogs around this time. This is the 2S1 Gvozdika. It is a SPG coming in to the USSR for rank 4. There's been a bunch of donkey vehicles that have been added to the game recently, and they're really trying to make them work. So let's see if this one can kind of fit the area as well. There was another vehicle added more recently, which I suppose is kind of similar to it, the 2S3M. This looks like kind of a younger brother of the vehicle. Anyway, let's get into the history of this box. The development of a new self-propelled gun for the Soviet Army was based on the well-proven D-30 howitzer and the chassis of the MTLB multipurpose amphibious towing vehicle. The D-30 towed howitzer was modified to be placed on the SPG turret. The MTLB chassis was lengthened by adding a wheel pair to improve the driving performance and increase the room of the fighting compartment. After a year of testing, the vehicle was put into service in September of 1970 under the designation 2S1 Gvozdika. Serial production of the SPG continued until 1991. The vehicle was produced in the USSR as well as in Bulgaria and Poland under license. The 2S1 is still in service with the armies of many countries in the world. So with the 2S1 coming in, we continue the march towards more SPHs in the game, and hopefully not an indirect fire type of mechanic. I'll be very surprised if they ever add anything like that in, but you never know, especially with the push towards it. The howitzers in general, or I suppose this is classed as an SPG, but you know what I mean, like howitzers in general have always been a little bit underrepresented in the game, especially at the higher echelons, and to see stuff like the AUF-1 added, obviously the band cannon and the 2S3M, and now the 2S1, it is kind of nice to see them more in there. I personally have issues with a lot of these vehicles, just because of the fact that they don't always do a ton of damage with the rounds. I much prefer the kind of precise use of AP, or APFSDS, or APDS, since I can shoot areas of vehicles, take out ammo, or take out areas, and then go from there. A lot of these SPHs really rely on overpressure as a mechanic, and the problem with that is you have to sometimes donk vehicles in very specific places in order to overpressure vehicles, and sometimes it just doesn't work, and that kind of sucks. With this vehicle, the 2S1, that might be slightly different. Instead of just firing HE, this 122mm howitzer of the D-30 family can also fire up to 5 heat rounds. So instead of just having to rely on overpressure to kill vehicles, you might have a chance to be able to go through vehicles with the heat round. It obviously depends on the velocity and also what the penetration is on it, but since it's a 122, it should be pretty good. If we have a look at another vehicle which has, I suppose, a similar 122, in the good old heavy tanks, they obviously have a ton of really nice they have a ton of really nice AP. Then you have the SU-122-54, which also has some nice AP, but I'll take the heat on this one, especially since it's a little bit lower velocity. My guess is this will be similar to something like the Object 268 with its 152mm gun, where it has heat which pens up to 250. I wouldn't be surprised if this is more like that instead of the heat FS from some others. So even though the vehicle is quite modern, it's based, well, it's up to a standard down to a price. I think that's probably the way to put it. This vehicle is designed obviously for either infantry support or for hitting areas with just, blowing it up with HE, and also designed to be efficient fiscally. So what it's based off of is something which you may have seen many times, and it's the MTLB. And this already has shown itself in-game. You have the Sturm S, which is a modified MTLB, then of course the Strela 10M2. Now, I would say the chassis so far has had mixed success. The Sturm S is one of those very, very situational vehicles which is only useful maybe about 2% of the time that you play it compared to a standard vehicle, you know, especially since it's 8.7, and you have a look at all the other 8.7s for the USSR, it's nowhere near the same level. And then you got the Strela, which they've had to buff about 5 times in order for it to be useful, but at least right now, it is useful. So, you know, at least there's that going around the place. So, at the same time, the chassis is okay mobility. Like, I wouldn't say it's, you know, groundbreaking or anything like that, but the one thing it doesn't do is provide absolutely any armor. So, since this thing's going to be rank 4, that's when light tanks become pretty crazy, and also at the same time you get a lot of 50 cals from other vehicles, so this thing's survivability will be pretty much 0. I highly doubt it's got any armor on the turret either, so you're going to have to shoot first in a vehicle like this. Now that might be a bit of a problem, since this will definitely lack gun depression, and also it will have problems with gun stability. These vehicles that I've found so far do not have the greatest targeting speed, because, well, in real life they don't need it, and also they usually don't have great elevation speed either, unless they're very modern when it comes to the game. And since this one isn't as modern as other ones, and is made, you know, mainly in the 70s and 80s, I don't imagine it having a great targeting speed, which is a bit of a problem. It also doesn't seem to have any secondary armament, so machine gun wise or anything like that, maybe it has a coaxial, you know, maybe it has a coaxial on this Gvozdika, but it doesn't have anything else, you know, and that's a bit of a problem. If it doesn't even have like a machine gun, which I don't think it does, then you are wholly reliant on the gun, and since this is a 122mm, maybe it has a problem with its loading, right? Maybe it has a issue with, you know, actually getting rounds out there, because technically the shell that it fires, the 122, it isn't, I don't think it's like assisted loaded or anything like that, so you're just gonna have to go for it, and that kind of sucks at this time. So its mobility might be quite good, or at least decent. Its survivability is non-existent, especially since it has no top-down armor. So, and it doesn't seem to have any HEVT. So it's going to be one of those vehicles that if you spawn it at the start of the game, yeah, you might get 1 or 2 or 3 kills. Maybe you donk some light tanks, maybe you donk some heavies, and then the planes come in and you die, which is one of the problems with a lot of these vehicles, right? It happens a lot with the 2S3M and also the Object 120, so it would be very surprising if it's, you know, not like this, but at least it's amphibious, so, you know, you can go for a swim before you capitulate, so at least there's that. These vehicles, I feel like a little bit outspoken about when it comes to the game overall. I don't really enjoy these donkey vehicles. I feel like they are ones which are kind of tough to get through. There's only some which I would actually say are fun. Things like the FV4005 are quite enjoyable. The 2S3M as a vehicle is not good. Once again, struggles with its targeting speed. Like, its targeting speed is literally only 7, which is no good. But its later to HE is quite effective. The AUF-1 I did okay in, but once again it was a bit of a struggle, and every time I was using it I was just thinking about all the other fantastic French vehicles that exist instead of using it. And then also, of course, stuff even like the Rogo Experiment for the Japanese, which has a similar playstyle, or the Type 75 SPH, which I personally really struggled with as well. These vehicles are not designed for front combat. They're not designed to be on the front line, and basically you're putting them in a scenario where they're on the front line, and that means that they just kind of get annihilated, and you hope that you can do some damage. I need to see the soft stats on this thing. I need to see its reload, I need to see its targeting speed, and I also need to see if it gets access to some pretty crazy shells, because if it doesn't, it's looking pretty rough. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Brendan Quinn, Vilneus, Character Fuel, Juan the Panda, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, Bareen, Peter Grayling, Alan Hacker, Sem Alslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R, and also Lafouche for supporting the channel.